Become the person your goals require. Identity-based growth. Change who you are, not just what you do. By T.M. Light. Description: unlock the secret to lasting personal growth with this transformational guide. It teaches identity-based growth, showing readers that success isn't about sheer willpower, motivation, or temporary habits. It's about who you choose to become. Through 10 powerful chapters, discover how to build self-trust, craft habits that align with your future self, release limiting beliefs, and live consistently without burnout. Perfect for anyone seeking sustainable change, confidence, and fulfillment, this book empowers you to stop chasing goals and start embodying the person who naturally achieves them, turning transformation into a lifestyle. Chapter outline. Introduction: who you become matters more than what you achieve. Chapter 1: Why goals alone don't change your life. Chapter 2: Identity is the root of every habit. Chapter 3: The invisible stories that shape who you are. Chapter 4: Choosing the identity your future demands. Chapter 5: Becoming before achieving. Chapter 6: Building habits that reinforce your new identity. Chapter 7: Letting go of the old version of you. Chapter 8: Identity-based discipline and self-trust. Chapter 9: Becoming consistent without burnout. Chapter 10: Living as the person your goals require. Conclusion: you don't rise to your goals, you fall to your identity. Introduction: who you become matters more than what you achieve. Most people don't fail because they don't want success badly enough. They fail because they're trying to build a new life with an old version of themselves. You've probably been here before. You set a goal that genuinely matters to you. You feel motivated, inspired, maybe even unstoppable at first. You plan, you start strong, and for a while it feels like this time will be different. Then slowly something slips. A missed day becomes 2. Discipline fades. Old habits return. Eventually, you're standing in the same place again, wondering what went wrong, and quietly questioning your ability to change. This cycle is exhausting, and worse, it's discouraging. Over time, repeated failures don't just hurt your progress, they start to shape how you see yourself. You begin to believe that maybe you're not disciplined enough, not focused enough, or not built for consistency. But the truth is far more compassionate and far more powerful than that. The problem was never your desire. It was never your intelligence, your worth, or your potential. The problem is that you were trying to force new behaviors onto an identity that hadn't changed yet. We live in a culture obsessed with outcomes. We talk about goals constantly: financial goals, fitness goals, career goals, relationship goals. We are taught to focus on what we want to achieve and to push ourselves harder until we get there. Discipline is praised. Hustle is glorified. Struggle is worn like a badge of honor. If something isn't working, the solution we're given is almost always the same: try harder. But effort alone has limits. You can only force yourself to act against who you believe you are for so long before resistance takes over. Eventually, your identity pulls you back to what feels familiar, even if what's familiar no longer serves you. This is why so many goals fail, even when they are realistic, meaningful, and deeply desired. Goals focus on the result, but identity determines the behavior required to get there. And behavior that feels disconnected from who you believe you are will always feel heavy, temporary, and unsustainable. Identity-based growth flips the entire conversation. Instead of asking, "What do I need to do to succeed?" it asks, "Who do I need to become?" This subtle shift changes everything. When your actions are aligned with your identity, consistency stops feeling like punishment. Discipline becomes self-respect. Progress becomes natural instead of forced. Think about the areas of life where consistency feels effortless. You don't need motivation to brush your teeth or answer your phone. You don't negotiate with yourself about whether you are the kind of person who shows up to work or keeps certain promises. These behaviors are not powered by motivation, they are powered by identity. You do them because they align with who you already believe you are. Now imagine applying that same internal alignment to your biggest goals. Most people attempt change from the outside in. They try to rearrange habits, schedules, and routines while leaving their self-concept untouched. But lasting change happens from the inside out. It happens when behavior becomes an expression of identity rather than an act of willpower. This book is built on a simple but transformative truth. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your identity. If you want different results, you must first become a different version of yourself internally. That doesn't mean becoming someone else or rejecting who you are. It means evolving. It means releasing outdated beliefs about yourself and consciously choosing an identity that supports the life you want to build. Growth is not about fixing something broken, it's about aligning with something truer. One of the most damaging myths about personal growth is the idea that inconsistency means failure. In reality, inconsistency is feedback. It shows you where your identity and your goals are misaligned. When you understand this, failure stops feeling personal and starts feeling informative. You are not lazy for struggling to maintain habits that don't match how you see yourself. You are not weak for falling back into patterns that once kept you safe or comfortable. You are human. And humans act in alignment with their beliefs, far more than their intentions. Identity-based growth doesn't ask you to overhaul your life overnight. It asks you to pay attention, to notice the stories you tell yourself, to recognize the labels you've accepted without question, to understand that every action you repeat is reinforcing a belief about who you are. This is where real change begins, not with pressure but with awareness. When you shift your identity, your goals stop feeling like uphill battles. The person who values their health doesn't need constant motivation to make better choices. The person who sees themselves as reliable doesn't struggle to follow through. The person who believes they are capable doesn't need external validation to keep going. This doesn't mean the journey becomes effortless. Growth still requires commitment. But it becomes aligned, and alignment is powerful. It removes the internal conflict between who you are and who you're trying to become. Throughout this book, you will learn how to identify the version of yourself your goals require, and how to begin embodying that identity now, not someday after success arrives. You will learn how to let go of limiting self-concepts, how to build habits that reinforce your new identity, and how to create progress that lasts because it feels true to who you are becoming. Most importantly, you will stop seeing change as a constant fight with yourself. Instead, you will learn to work with yourself. This is an invitation to stop chasing outcomes and start building identity. To stop asking, "Why can't I stick to this?" and start asking, "Who do I believe I am?" Because the moment that belief shifts, everything else begins to follow. If you want different results, you must first become different internally. And that transformation begins now, with who you choose to be. Chapter 1: Why Goals Alone Don't Change Your Life. Most people believe their problem is a lack of discipline. They think if they could just stay focused a little longer, push a little harder, or want success badly enough, everything would finally fall into place. So they set goals. Big goals. Specific goals. Carefully planned goals. And for a moment, it feels like progress has begun. Then life happens. Motivation fades. Energy dips. Old habits resurface. The excitement that once fueled the goal quietly disappears, leaving behind frustration, guilt, and self-doubt. Eventually, the goal is abandoned or postponed, and the same painful question arises again: why can't I stick to anything? This is where many people turn against themselves. They blame their willpower. They question their character. They assume something must be wrong with them. But the truth is simpler and far more hopeful than that. Goals alone don't change lives. Identity does. Goals are not useless. They can be inspiring. They give direction. They provide clarity about what you want. But goals on their own are temporary. They exist outside of you. Once they are achieved, replaced, or abandoned, their power fades. Identity, on the other hand, lives within you. It shapes your decisions long after motivation disappears. The traditional goal-setting mindset focuses almost entirely on outcomes. Lose the weight. Make the money. Get the promotion. Build the business. Outcomes are attractive because they promise relief, validation, and transformation. We believe that once we reach them, everything will finally feel different. But outcomes don't create identity. Identity creates outcomes. When you chase results without changing how you see yourself, you are constantly swimming against an invisible current. You may make progress for a while, but eventually your beliefs pull you back to what feels familiar. This isn't weakness. It's alignment. Human beings naturally act in accordance with who they believe they are. This is why someone can lose weight and gain it all back. Why someone can make money and still feel insecure. Why someone can achieve success and still sabotage it. Without an identity shift, achievements don't anchor. They float, unsupported, until old patterns reclaim their place. Burnout often begins here. When actions are driven purely by pressure, instead of identity, every step feels heavy. Discipline feels like punishment. Consistency feels like deprivation. You're constantly forcing yourself to be someone you don't yet believe you are. That tension is exhausting. Eventually, the mind looks for relief. And relief usually comes in the form of quitting. This is where self-blame enters the picture. People internalize failure as proof of personal deficiency. They don't see that the system was flawed, they believe they are. They don't realize they were trying to sustain behaviors that didn't match their self-concept. Goals ask, what do you want to achieve? Identity asks, who are you becoming? One question leads to pressure. The other leads to alignment. There is a profound difference between chasing results and building character. Results are visible. Character is invisible, but it's what carries you forward when no one is watching. When you focus only on results, you measure success by external milestones. When you focus on identity, you measure success by integrity, consistency, and self-trust. Self-trust is one of the most underrated forces in personal growth. It's built quietly, moment by moment, when your actions align with your values. It's destroyed just as quietly when you repeatedly abandon yourself. Goals without identity often damage self-trust because they encourage all-or-nothing thinking. You're either on track or you've failed. There is no room for humanity. Identity-based growth restores self-trust because it shifts the focus from perfection to alignment. You are no longer asking yourself to perform miracles. You are asking yourself to show up as the kind of person you are becoming. Think about the difference between someone who says, "I'm trying to quit smoking," and someone who says, "I'm not a smoker." The behavior may look similar at first, but the internal experience is completely different. One feels like a struggle. The other feels like a boundary. Identity simplifies decisions that goals complicate. Goals require constant motivation. Identity requires commitment. Motivation is emotional. It rises and falls with circumstances. Identity is stable. It doesn't depend on how you feel in the moment. When you identify as someone who honors their health, their time, or their word, your choices become less negotiable. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it today?" and start asking, "Is this who I am?" This is why identity is permanent while goals are temporary. You may reach a goal and immediately set another. But the person you become in the process stays with you. Skills compound. Confidence deepens. Standards rise. You don't just achieve something, you transform. The mistake most people make is believing that identity comes after success. They think confidence, discipline, and self-belief are rewards for achievement. In reality, they are prerequisites. You don't become disciplined because you succeeded. You succeed because you practiced discipline before the results showed up. This doesn't mean pretending to be someone you're not. It means choosing who you are becoming and taking small, consistent actions that support that identity. Every action you repeat is a vote for the kind of person you believe yourself to be. Over time, those votes add up. Identity shifts quietly, then suddenly. When you understand this, goals stop being sources of pressure and start becoming expressions of identity. You no longer chase success to feel worthy. You build worthiness through alignment, and success follows naturally. This shift changes how you experience setbacks. Failure no longer defines you. It informs you. A missed day doesn't mean you're undisciplined, it means you're human. And humans who are committed to growth don't quit, they adjust. Goals encourage finish lines. Identity encourages lifestyle. A finish line mentality says, "Once I get there, I can relax." An identity mindset says, "This is who I am now." One leads to regression. The other leads to evolution. When you tie your growth to identity, there is no finish line, only forward movement. This is where real freedom begins. You stop being at war with yourself. You stop swinging between extremes of motivation and guilt. You begin to trust yourself again, not because you're perfect, but because you're consistent. Real success is not a moment. It's a way of being. When you become the kind of person who keeps promises to themselves, progress becomes inevitable. When you become the kind of person who values growth over comfort, change becomes sustainable. When you become the kind of person who sees effort as self-respect rather than punishment, burnout loses its grip. Goals can point you in the right direction, but they cannot carry you there. Only identity can do that. This chapter is not an argument against ambition. It's an invitation to anchor ambition in something deeper than motivation. It's a reminder that you don't need to push harder, you need to align better. As you move forward in this book, you will begin shifting your focus from what you want to achieve to who you are choosing to become. That shift will change how you set goals, how you respond to failure, and how you define success itself. Because when your identity changes, your life has no choice but to follow. Chapter 2: Identity is the root of every habit. Every habit you repeat is not just a behavior. It is a message. It is a quiet statement about who you believe you are. Most people think habits are about discipline, willpower, or self-control. They believe that if they could just push themselves harder, set better reminders, or find the right system, their habits would finally change. But habits are not born from effort alone. They are born from identity. Long before a habit becomes visible, it exists internally as a belief. Long before an action is repeated, it is justified by a story you tell yourself about who you are. This is why habits feel automatic. They are not random. They are aligned. You do not wake up every day and consciously decide to act like yourself. You simply do. You move through life according to the identity you've accepted, often without realizing it. Your habits are not accidents. They are expressions. This is why two people can have the same goal and take completely different actions. One follows through naturally, while the other struggles constantly. The difference is not motivation. It is self-perception. One person's habits align with how they see themselves. The other's habits feel like a performance. Identity drives behavior because the brain seeks consistency. Humans are wired to act in ways that confirm their beliefs about themselves. If you believe you are disorganized, you will unconsciously reinforce that belief through your actions. If you believe you are capable and reliable, your habits will reflect that belief even on difficult days. This happens quietly. You don't wake up thinking, "I will sabotage myself today." You wake up acting in alignment with what feels familiar and true to you. This is why habits are not moral failures. They are not proof that you are lazy, broken, or undisciplined. They are signals. They reveal the identity you are currently operating from. When you understand this, shame loses its power, and clarity takes its place. Most people try to fix habits by attacking the behavior. They punish themselves for slipping. They promise to do better next time. They swing between control and collapse. But behavior is the surface. Identity is the root. You cannot sustainably change the surface without addressing what lies beneath it. Think about the labels you've accepted over time. Some were given to you. Some you adopted after failure. Some you repeated so often they began to feel like facts. I'm bad with money. I'm not consistent. I always procrastinate. I'm just not disciplined. These statements feel harmless, even honest, but they quietly shape your actions. When you label yourself, your brain works to keep you consistent with that label. Every habit becomes evidence. Every slip reinforces the story. Over time, identity hardens and change feels harder, not because you can't change, but because you're fighting against who you believe you are. Positive labels work the same way. When someone identifies as a reader, a runner, a leader, or a disciplined person, their habits follow. They don't rely on motivation because their actions feel like self-expression. They are simply being who they are. This is the hidden power of identity. It removes friction. It simplifies decisions. It reduces the need for constant self-negotiation. The key is understanding that identity is not fixed. It is formed. And it is formed through repetition. You were not born believing the things you believe about yourself. Those beliefs were shaped by experiences, feedback, environment, and interpretation. And just as they were formed, they can be reshaped. Habits play a dual role in this process. They are both the result of identity and the builder of identity. Every time you repeat an action, you are reinforcing a belief. Every time you choose differently, you are casting a vote for a new version of yourself. This is why small habits matter more than dramatic changes. They are not small at the identity level. They are evidence. They tell your mind, "This is who I am now." Over time, that evidence compounds and identity shifts. Most people wait for identity to change before they change their habits. They say they will act confident once they feel confident, or disciplined once they feel disciplined. But identity does not change through intention. It changes through action. You become reliable by keeping small promises to yourself. You become focused by practicing focus, even imperfectly. You become healthy by acting in ways that honor your body, not by waiting to feel motivated. This process is not about pretending. It is about practicing. You are not lying to yourself when you choose a new behavior. You are teaching yourself. The story you tell yourself matters more than the behavior itself. Two people can miss the same habit and respond differently. One says, "I always fail. This proves it." The other says, "This was a slip, not a definition." One reinforces an old identity. The other protects a new one. This is where compassion becomes a tool for growth, not an excuse. When you understand that habits are identity signals, you stop attacking yourself and start listening. You ask better questions. Not "what's wrong with me?" but "what belief is driving this behavior?" That question changes everything. When someone procrastinates, it is often not because they are lazy, but because they identify as someone who avoids discomfort or fears failure. When someone overeats, it is often not about food, but about comfort, stress, or identity tied to coping. When someone quits, it is often because they identify as someone who doesn't finish, not because they lack ability. Changing habits means changing the story. It means gently but firmly challenging the labels you've accepted, and choosing new ones that align with the life you want to build. This does not require perfection. In fact, perfection blocks identity change because it keeps you focused on outcomes instead of consistency. Identity grows through repetition, not performance. Every time you act in alignment with the person you want to become, even briefly, you weaken the old identity and strengthen the new one. Even when it feels awkward. Even when it feels unnatural. That discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of growth. Your current habits are not a life sentence. They are a snapshot of who you've been practicing being. Practice something new long enough and the picture changes. This is where empowerment returns. You stop seeing habits as proof of limitation and start seeing them as opportunities for identity evolution. You realize that you are not fighting yourself. You are teaching yourself. The moment you change the way you interpret your actions, you change their power. A habit is no longer something you do, it is something you are becoming. Identity is not changed through force. It is changed through consistency, honesty, and choice. You choose what actions to repeat. You choose which stories to reinforce. You choose which labels to release. This chapter invites you to stop judging your habits and start understanding them. To stop labeling yourself by your past and start defining yourself by your direction. To realize that every small action is shaping who you are, whether you're aware of it or not. And once you become aware, you regain control. Because when you change the story you tell yourself about who you are, your habits will follow. And when your habits follow, your life begins to change, not from the outside in but from the inside out. Identity is the root. And from that root, everything grows. Chapter 3: The Invisible Stories That Shape Who You Are. Long before you make a decision, long before you take action, a story has already been told inside your mind. You don't always hear it clearly. It doesn't always announce itself. It whispers in familiar phrases, quiet assumptions, and automatic reactions. It shows up in the way you hesitate before trying, the way you explain your failures, and the way you predict your future. This story feels like truth, because you've been listening to it for so long. But it is still a story. Every human being lives inside a narrative about who they are and what is possible for them. This narrative is not something you consciously chose. It was shaped over time by experiences, relationships, environments, and moments that left emotional marks. And yet, this invisible story has enormous power. It quietly directs your choices, limits your courage, and defines your sense of what you deserve. Most people try to change their lives without ever questioning this story. They focus on effort while ignoring belief. They chase goals while carrying an identity that contradicts success. And then they wonder why progress feels so difficult. Your internal dialogue is not background noise. It is instruction. The mind is constantly interpreting reality, and those interpretations become conclusions about the self. A child who tries and fails may not think, "This was a learning experience." They think, "I'm not good at this." A teenager who is criticized repeatedly may not think, This environment is unhealthy. They think, there must be something wrong with me. Over time, these conclusions harden into identity. The most powerful stories are not dramatic. They are subtle. They sound reasonable. They feel familiar. Statements like "I'm just not disciplined," or "I always quit," or "people like me don't get ahead" don't feel like stories. They feel like observations. But they are interpretations, not facts. Once a story is accepted, the mind looks for evidence to support it. Confirmation becomes comfort. You notice the moments that prove the story, and overlook the ones that challenge it. The story survives not because it is true, but because it is reinforced. This is how invisible stories sabotage growth. They do not stop you directly. They guide you quietly away from possibility. They influence the risks you take, the standards you accept, and the effort you believe is worth giving. They shape your expectations before you ever begin. If you believe you always quit, your mind will look for exits the moment things get uncomfortable. If you believe you're not disciplined, you will interpret struggle as proof instead of part of the process. If you believe success is for other people, you will unconsciously shrink your own goals to avoid disappointment. These stories are powerful because they protect you from pain. They lower expectations so failure hurts less. They keep you within familiar limits. They create a sense of predictability. But they also keep you stuck. Many of these narratives were never meant to define you. They were formed in moments of survival, not self-expression. They helped you make sense of experiences when you didn't have the tools or perspective to interpret them differently. But what once helped you cope may now be holding you back. The first step to change is not confrontation. It is awareness. You cannot rewrite a story you don't know you're telling. And you cannot change an identity you are unconsciously defending. Pay attention to the language you use with yourself, especially in moments of challenge. Notice what you say when you fail, when you're tired, when you're afraid. That voice is not random. It is rehearsed. It has been practiced for years. For many people, the inner dialogue is harsher than anything they would say to another person. It is unforgiving, absolute, and deeply personal. It doesn't say, "You made a mistake." It says, "This is who you are." Over time, that distinction matters. Awareness does not mean immediately silencing this voice. It means recognizing it as a narrator, not a judge. You can listen without obeying. You can observe without agreeing. This is where power begins to return. When you realize that your thoughts are not commands but stories, you gain space. Space to question. Space to pause. Space to choose a different interpretation. That space is where identity transformation lives. A belief only has power if it goes unquestioned. The moment you begin to notice a thought and ask where it came from, it loosens. You may realize it was borrowed from a parent, a teacher, a past failure, or a cultural message that was never designed for your growth. You begin to see that many of your truths were inherited, not chosen. This realization can be unsettling. It can feel like the ground shifting beneath your feet. But it is also deeply freeing. Because if the story was learned, it can be unlearned. And if it can be unlearned, a new story can be written. Rewriting your story does not mean denying your past. It means reframing it. It means choosing to see experiences as information rather than identity. Failure becomes feedback. Struggle becomes evidence of effort. Growth becomes a process, not a personality trait. You are not the story you tell yourself when you are afraid. You are the one who hears it. The goal is not to replace negative stories with unrealistic affirmations. It is to replace limiting interpretations with honest, empowering ones. A story that says, "I'm learning to be consistent," leaves room for growth. A story that says, "I haven't mastered this yet," invites patience. A story that says, "I am becoming someone who follows through," creates direction. Stories shape behavior because they shape expectation. When you expect yourself to fail, you prepare to quit. When you expect yourself to grow, you tolerate discomfort. Expectation changes endurance. This is why awareness is the first step. Not discipline. Not motivation. Awareness. Once you see the story, you can interrupt it. You can catch the moment where an old belief tries to decide your future. You can choose not to follow it. That choice, repeated, becomes a new habit of thought. And that habit of thought becomes a new identity. This process takes time. Stories don't dissolve overnight. They soften gradually, as new evidence accumulates. Every time you act in alignment with a new narrative, even slightly, you weaken the old one. Over time, the new story feels less like effort and more like truth. You begin to speak to yourself differently. With more honesty. More patience. More respect. Not because you are pretending, but because your experience is changing. Your internal dialogue matters because you are always listening. Even when you think you're not. The story you tell yourself today is shaping the person you will be tomorrow. And the most important realization is this: you are allowed to change the story. You are not disloyal to your past by outgrowing it. You are not dishonest by believing something better about yourself. You are not arrogant for expecting more from life. You are responding to who you are becoming. This chapter invites you to become curious about your inner world. To listen without judgment. To question without fear. To recognize that the invisible stories guiding your life are not permanent truths, but editable narratives. When you change the story, you change the direction. And when you change the direction, you change who you become. Awareness is not the end of transformation. It is the beginning. Chapter 4: Choosing the Identity Your Future Demands. Every future you desire already has a version of you attached to it. That version thinks differently, chooses differently, responds differently to pressure, failure, and opportunity. They are not lucky. They are not special. They are aligned. And the moment you understand this, your entire approach to growth begins to change. Most people ask the wrong question when they want change. They ask, "What do I want to achieve?" and then immediately look for strategies, plans, and shortcuts. But achievement without alignment is fragile. It depends on motivation, circumstances, and constant effort. The better question, the one that leads to lasting transformation, is this: who would I need to be to make this inevitable? That question shifts the focus from chasing outcomes to becoming the person who naturally creates them. Your future is not blocked by a lack of opportunity. It is shaped by the identity you are currently living from. Every choice you make today is being filtered through that identity. Your standards, your boundaries, your habits, and even your tolerance for discomfort are all reflections of who you believe you are. If you want a different future, you must first choose a different identity. This choice is not dramatic or instant. It is intentional. It is quiet. And it is powerful. Identity design begins with clarity. Not about goals, but about values. Values are the internal compass of identity. They determine what you prioritize when no one is watching. They guide your decisions when motivation fades. Without values, identity becomes performance. With values, it becomes alignment. When your actions reflect your values, effort feels meaningful instead of draining. You are no longer forcing yourself to behave a certain way. You are expressing who you are choosing to be. Most people inherit their identity by default. They adopt values from family, culture, or circumstance, without ever questioning whether those values support the life they want to live. Intentional identity design requires you to pause and ask whether the version of you are living as is compatible with the future you desire. This can be uncomfortable. It requires honesty. It requires letting go of excuses that once felt protective. It requires admitting that some parts of your current identity may no longer serve you. But discomfort is not a sign you are doing something wrong. It is a sign you are growing beyond familiarity. The identity your future demands is not someone perfect. It is someone consistent. Someone who holds standards, not just dreams. Someone who acts in alignment, even when it's inconvenient. Someone who sees discomfort as part of the process, not a signal to quit. Standards are the backbone of identity. Goals describe what you want. Standards define what you accept. When standards rise, behavior changes automatically. You stop negotiating with yourself about basic commitments. You stop tolerating patterns that pull you away from who you are becoming. This is where success stops feeling like force. When you are aligned with your chosen identity, effort feels purposeful. Discipline feels like self-respect. Consistency feels natural because it matches who you believe you are. But this alignment doesn't happen accidentally. It is built through conscious choice. You begin by deciding what kind of person your future requires. Not in vague terms, but in principles. The future you want requires someone who follows through, even imperfectly. Someone who takes responsibility without self-attack. Someone who chooses growth over comfort more often than not. You don't need to become that person overnight. You need to commit to becoming them gradually. Identity is not changed through declaration. It is changed through embodiment. You embody a new identity by making choices that align with it, especially when it would be easier not to. This is where many people hesitate. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel confident. They wait for proof that the new identity is real. But identity is proven through action, not intention. You do not wait to feel disciplined before acting disciplined. You act disciplined, and discipline becomes part of who you are. You do not wait to feel worthy before showing up. You show up and worthiness grows. This is not pretending. It is practicing. The identity your future demands is not separate from you. It is built from your current self, one decision at a time. Each aligned choice is a bridge between who you are and who you are becoming. Alignment removes resistance because it removes internal conflict. When your actions contradict your identity, your mind pushes back. When they align, your mind cooperates. This is why some changes feel exhausting and others feel empowering. The difference is alignment. When you choose an identity intentionally, you begin filtering decisions through a new lens. You ask yourself not what is easiest or most comfortable, but what is most aligned. That question simplifies life. It removes unnecessary debate. It creates clarity. Clarity breeds confidence. As you live from your chosen identity, your environment begins to respond. You attract opportunities that match your standards. You set boundaries that protect your energy. You stop seeking permission to grow. This does not mean you never doubt yourself. Doubt is part of growth. But doubt no longer controls your direction. Your identity does. There will be moments when the old identity resurfaces. When fear speaks in familiar language. When comfort tempts you to return to old patterns. These moments are not failures. They are tests of commitment. Every time you choose alignment over familiarity, you reinforce the new identity. Every time you act in integrity with your future self, you strengthen self-trust. Over time, The new identity becomes automatic. This is how success becomes inevitable. Not because you force it, but because you are no longer fighting yourself. The most powerful transformation happens when who you are aligns with what you want. At that point, success is no longer something you chase. It is something you allow. Choosing the identity your future demands is an act of courage. It means believing in a version of yourself you haven't fully met yet. It means letting go of limitations that once felt like truth. It means stepping into responsibility without shame. But it is also an act of self-respect. You are not here to live beneath your potential. You are here to grow into it. And growth begins not with effort alone but with identity. Your future is waiting for you to meet it halfway. And the way you do that is by choosing, today, to become the person who belongs there. Chapter 5: Becoming before achieving. One of the most common lies people believe about success is that confidence comes after you win, discipline comes after you succeed, and worthiness comes after you prove yourself. This belief keeps millions of people stuck in waiting mode. Waiting to feel ready. Waiting to feel confident. Waiting to feel good enough before they fully show up. But readiness does not precede growth. Growth creates readiness. You do not become confident because life finally gives you permission. You become confident because you act before you feel certain. You do not become disciplined because things get easier. You become disciplined because you practice showing up when things are hard. And worthiness is not something you earn through achievement. It is something you embody through self-respect. This chapter is about dismantling the idea that you must achieve before you are allowed to become. Most people are trying to reach a future version of themselves without behaving like that person today. They imagine a confident, disciplined, grounded version of themselves living somewhere on the other side of success. They believe that once they arrive there, they will finally feel different inside. But that future version is not created by achievement. It is created by behavior, repeated long before results appear. Becoming always comes before achieving. The reason this truth is uncomfortable is because it removes the excuse of waiting. It asks you to practice the qualities you want before you feel qualified to have them. It asks you to show up without guarantees. It asks you to trust the process instead of demanding proof up front. And yet, this is how all real transformation happens. Confidence is not a feeling you discover. It is a relationship you build with yourself. Every time you keep a small promise, confidence grows. Every time you act despite fear, confidence deepens. It is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet and cumulative. Discipline works the same way. It is not a personality trait reserved for certain people. It is a skill developed through repetition. Every time you choose alignment over comfort, even briefly, discipline becomes part of your identity. The mistake many people make is trying to perform confidence and discipline perfectly instead of practicing them imperfectly. They believe that one misstep disqualifies them. But identity is not built through perfection. It is built through consistency. Small actions matter because they teach your brain who you are. Every repeated behavior sends a message. When you show up even when it's uncomfortable, you are teaching yourself that you are someone who follows through. When you stop at the first sign of resistance, you are teaching yourself that you retreat when things get hard. These lessons shape belief. This is why embodiment is more powerful than intention. You don't become something by wishing. You become it by practicing. Acting as the person you are becoming does not mean pretending to be flawless or confident at all times. It means asking in each moment, what choice aligns with the identity you are building? Sometimes that choice will be small. Sometimes it will feel insignificant. But insignificance is an illusion. Identity listens closely to repetition. The person you are becoming is not built in grand gestures. They are built in ordinary moments. In the decision to try again after failing. In the decision to stop negotiating with yourself about what matters. In the decision to show up honestly, instead of hiding behind excuses. This is where self-belief is rewired. Belief does not come first. Evidence does. And evidence is created by action. When you repeatedly act in alignment with the person you want to become, your mind begins to accept a new story. It stops arguing. It starts cooperating. What once felt forced begins to feel natural. This is how identity shifts from effort to embodiment. The problem with waiting to achieve before becoming is that it places your identity in the hands of outcomes you cannot fully control. It tells you that you are only worthy if you succeed, only confident if you win, only disciplined if results show up quickly. This creates anxiety, pressure, and fragility. When your sense of self depends on results, every setback feels personal. Every delay feels like proof of inadequacy. Growth becomes heavy. But when your identity is rooted in becoming, not achieving, progress feels lighter. You are no longer asking success to validate you. You are validating yourself through alignment. This doesn't make you complacent. It makes you resilient. Resilient people are not those who never fail. They are those who do not collapse when they do. They understand that failure does not erase identity. It informs it. This chapter invites you to stop waiting for permission to become who you are capable of being. You do not need a perfect plan to start acting with integrity. You do not need full confidence to take the next step. You do not need external validation to honor your commitment to growth. You need willingness. Willingness to show up before you feel ready. Willingness to practice qualities before they feel natural. Willingness to accept that growth is awkward before it is elegant. Every time you choose embodiment over perfection, you strengthen your future self. Perfection demands certainty. Embodiment allows learning. Perfection asks, what if I fail? Embodiment asks, what can I practice today? This shift changes everything. When you embody the identity you are becoming, results become a byproduct instead of a prerequisite. You stop chasing confidence and start building it. You stop demanding discipline and start practicing it. You stop outsourcing worthiness and start living it. This is how progress becomes sustainable. You begin to trust yourself, not because you always succeed, but because you keep showing up. Self-trust grows when your actions and intentions align. That alignment creates internal safety. And from that safety, courage grows. Becoming before achieving also frees you from comparison. You stop measuring yourself against others' outcomes and start measuring yourself against your own alignment. This brings focus back to where it belongs, your growth, your standards, your path. The future you want is not waiting for a perfect version of you. It is waiting for a committed one. A version of you who is willing to act before certainty, who understands that confidence is built in motion, and who knows that worthiness is not earned through success but expressed through self-respect. Every time you act in alignment with who you are becoming, you move closer to that future. Even when the progress is invisible. Even when the results are delayed. Embodiment is quiet. But it is powerful. This chapter is a reminder that you do not need to arrive before you begin. You begin, and arrival takes care of itself. Becoming is the work. Achieving is the echo. And when you commit to becoming first, everything else follows. Chapter 6: Building habits that reinforce your new identity. Habits are not just things you do. They are evidence of who you believe you are. Every day, whether you realize it or not, you are casting votes for the kind of person you are becoming. These votes are not dramatic. They don't announce themselves. They happen quietly in ordinary moments, when you choose to show up or check out, when you follow through or postpone, when you honor yourself or negotiate your standards away. Over time, these small decisions accumulate. And what they accumulate into is identity. This is where many people misunderstand habit formation. They approach habits as tools for productivity or efficiency, something to optimize or perfect. They focus on streaks, systems, and discipline, hoping that if they just find the right method, consistency will finally stick. But habits don't fail because systems are weak. They fail because identity is misaligned. When a habit reinforces how you see yourself, it feels natural. When it contradicts your self-image, it feels forced. You can push through force for a while, but alignment lasts longer. This chapter is not about doing more. It is about becoming more aligned. When you decide to change your identity, habits become the bridge between intention and embodiment. They are how the invisible becomes visible. They are how belief turns into proof. The most powerful habits are not the most impressive ones. They are the ones you repeat consistently enough to trust yourself again. Self-trust is built the same way identity is built, slowly through kept promises. And habits are promises you make to yourself in advance. Every time you keep one, even a small one, you reinforce the belief that you are reliable. Every time you break one without compassion or adjustment, you weaken that belief. Over time, this determines whether habits feel supportive or punishing. Many people set habits that look good on paper, but feel heavy in practice. They choose actions that reflect who they think they should be, not who they are becoming. This creates resistance. Resistance leads to inconsistency. Inconsistency leads to self-criticism. Aligned habits work differently. They are designed not to impress, but to reinforce identity. When a habit feels aligned, it doesn't require constant negotiation. It fits into your life, instead of fighting it. It feels like self-respect, not self-control. This is why small daily actions matter more than big occasional efforts. Small actions are repeatable. Repeatable actions build trust. Trust builds identity. A habit does not need to be intense to be meaningful. It needs to be consistent enough to send a clear message to your mind: this is who I am now. This is the concept of habits as evidence. Your brain is always looking for proof. When you tell yourself you are becoming disciplined, but repeatedly avoid small commitments, the brain believes the behavior, not the intention. When you tell yourself you are becoming healthier, and take one aligned action daily, the brain begins to accept that identity. This is not about perfection. It is about credibility. Credibility with yourself is one of the most powerful forces in personal growth. When you trust yourself, change accelerates. When you don't, even simple habits feel exhausting. Habits that reinforce identity are chosen with honesty. They reflect your current capacity, while stretching you slightly toward your future self. They are not about punishment or extremes. They are about alignment. When you choose habits that are too far removed from who you believe you are, your mind resists. It interprets the behavior as temporary. When you choose habits that feel achievable and meaningful, your mind begins to integrate them into identity. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Consistency tells your brain that this behavior is part of who you are. Intensity tells your brain that this behavior is an exception. Identity grows through repetition, not performance. Every time you show up in a small way, you strengthen the bridge between your current self and your future self. Every time you honor your commitment, you tell yourself a new story: I am someone who follows through. Over time, that story becomes belief. Designing aligned habits requires you to stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What would reinforce who I am becoming?" That question changes everything. A habit aligned with identity feels meaningful even on low-energy days. It doesn't depend on motivation. It depends on intention. When habits feel forced, it is often because they are rooted in shame or comparison. You are trying to fix yourself instead of support yourself. Identity-based habits come from respect, not rejection. This shift changes how you respond when you miss a habit. Instead of collapsing into self-blame, you return to alignment. You adjust without quitting. You recommit without drama. Because your identity is no longer fragile. It is resilient. Aligned habits create momentum without burnout because they are sustainable. They are designed to be repeated, not endured. Over time, these habits stack. Not just in behavior, but in belief. You begin to see yourself differently. You stop identifying as someone who tries, and start identifying as someone who does. This transformation is subtle but profound. Habits also shape how you speak to yourself. When you keep promises, your inner dialogue softens. When you see yourself showing up, your confidence becomes grounded instead of performative. You no longer need external validation to feel capable. This is how habits build identity from the inside out. The goal is not to build a perfect routine. It is to build a relationship with yourself based on trust. Habits are simply the language that relationship speaks. As your identity strengthens, habits require less effort. What once felt like discipline becomes default. What once felt like resistance becomes rhythm. This is not because life gets easier, but because you get more aligned. The person you are becoming does not rely on bursts of motivation. They rely on systems of self-respect. They understand that small actions repeated over time shape destiny. This chapter invites you to stop chasing transformation through force and start reinforcing it through consistency. To see habits not as chores but as votes. To understand that every day you are deciding who you are becoming through what you repeat. You don't need to overhaul your life. You need to show up consistently for the version of yourself you are building. One aligned habit at a time. Because when habits reinforce identity, change becomes inevitable. Chapter 7. Letting go of the old version of you. There is a quiet grief that comes with growth, and most people are never taught how to recognize it. We talk about change as if it is only exciting, only empowering, only forward-moving. We celebrate beginnings, but rarely acknowledge endings. Yet every time you evolve, something must be left behind. And even when what you leave behind no longer serves you, letting go can still hurt. This is where many people get stuck. They think resistance means they are doing something wrong. They interpret fear as a warning instead of a transition. They confuse discomfort with failure. But the truth is this: growth often requires mourning the version of you that once felt safe. The old version of you had a purpose. It protected you. It helped you survive certain seasons, environments, and emotional realities. It learned patterns that once made sense. Even habits you now want to change were once solutions to a problem you were trying to solve. So when you try to let go of that version, your nervous system reacts. Not because you are weak, but because familiarity feels like safety. This is why change can feel threatening even when it's positive. Your mind does not measure growth by potential. It measures safety by familiarity. And when you begin to step into a new identity, the mind often tries to pull you back, not out of sabotage but out of protection. Understanding this changes how you relate to resistance. Resistance is not proof that you are incapable. It is proof that you are crossing an internal boundary. It is a sign that you are leaving known territory and stepping into something new. Fear shows up here. Not always as panic, but as hesitation, procrastination, overthinking, or sudden doubt. Guilt shows up too. Guilt for changing when others expect you to stay the same. Guilt for outgrowing roles, relationships, or versions of yourself that people recognize. And then there is attachment. Attachment to the story of who you've been. Attachment to labels that once explained your struggles. Attachment to identities that kept expectations low and disappointment manageable. Letting go of the old version of you can feel like betrayal. As if you are abandoning who you were. As if you are denying your past. As if you are pretending it didn't matter. But letting go is not erasing. It is honoring without remaining. You can respect the version of you that got you here, without allowing it to define where you go next. Many people unconsciously sabotage their progress at this stage. They don't do it because they don't want change. They do it because part of them is still loyal to the old identity. That loyalty shows up in subtle ways. Missing commitments. Downplaying success. Returning to familiar habits during moments of stress. This self-sabotage is not a character flaw. It is a signal. It is the part of you asking, is it safe to let this go? The answer is not force. The answer is compassion. When you shame yourself for resistance, you strengthen it. When you understand it, you soften it. Growth that is rushed often collapses. Growth that is integrated lasts. Letting go of the old version of you requires permission. Permission to change. Permission to disappoint expectations. Permission to redefine yourself without explanation. It also requires grief. Grief for the time you spent believing limiting stories. Grief for opportunities missed because you didn't yet know who you could become. Grief for the comfort that familiarity provided, even when it kept you small. This grief does not mean you regret growth. It means you are human. There is no transformation without loss. And there is no loss without emotion. But here is what is often missed: the grief passes. What remains is freedom. When you release an outdated identity, you create space. Space for new habits, new standards, new ways of relating to yourself. Space for possibility. Letting go does not mean you will never feel tempted by old patterns. It means you no longer identify with them. They become memories, not instructions. This is the difference between relapse and reflection. Between repetition and learning. You are not required to punish yourself for who you used to be. You are required to stop living there. Evolution asks you to loosen your grip on what no longer fits. It asks you to trust that you can survive without the armor you once needed. It asks you to believe that growth is not abandonment, but expansion. When you let go with compassion, you do not fracture your identity. You integrate it. You carry forward the wisdom without dragging the weight. This is how you avoid becoming stuck between versions of yourself. Many people linger in this in-between space, unsure whether to return to the familiar or commit fully to the new. This is often the most uncomfortable phase of growth. The old identity no longer fits, but the new one doesn't yet feel solid. This liminal space can feel lonely. You may feel misunderstood. You may feel like you don't fully belong anywhere yet. But this space is not a dead end. It is a doorway. If you stay present instead of retreating, identity stabilizes. The new version of you begins to feel real. Not because fear disappears, but because trust grows. Trust in your ability to adapt. Trust in your capacity to handle discomfort. Trust that you are allowed to change. Letting go is not failure. It is refinement. You are not quitting on yourself. You are choosing yourself more honestly. The old version of you did the best they could, with the awareness they had. The new version of you does better, because they know more. That is not disloyalty. That is growth. This chapter invites you to release shame around change. To understand that resistance is part of the process, not a sign to stop. To allow yourself to grieve what you are leaving behind, without letting it pull you backward. You are not meant to stay the same. You are meant to evolve, revise and rise. And every time you let go of an identity that no longer serves you, you make room for the person you are becoming. That is not loss. That is transformation. Chapter 8: Identity-Based Discipline and Self-Trust. For many people, the word discipline carries weight. It feels heavy, restrictive, even punishing. It brings to mind rigidity, force, and constant self-denial. Some people believe discipline is something you either have or don't have, a personality trait reserved for the naturally focused, the highly motivated, or the unusually strong-willed. This belief does more damage than most people realize. When discipline is seen as a personality flaw, every struggle becomes personal. Every missed commitment feels like proof that something is wrong with you. Over time, this erodes confidence and replaces growth with self-criticism. Discipline becomes something you fear failing at, instead of something you build. But discipline is not a personality trait. It is an identity trait. It is not about how hard you push yourself. It is about how consistently you honor yourself. Identity-based discipline changes the relationship you have with effort. Instead of forcing yourself through resistance, you act from alignment. Instead of relying on emotional motivation, you rely on integrity. Instead of swinging between intensity and burnout, you build steadiness. This kind of discipline feels lighter because it is rooted in self-respect. Most people try to discipline themselves with pressure. They use guilt as fuel. They make harsh promises they cannot keep, then punish themselves when they fall short. This creates a cycle of overcommitment and collapse. Motivation spikes, expectations soar, and reality eventually catches up. Identity-based discipline works differently. It begins with honesty. You stop asking yourself to do what you cannot sustain, and start asking yourself to do what you can repeat. You stop trying to become disciplined overnight, and start practicing being reliable. Reliability is the foundation of self-trust. Self-trust is not built by grand gestures. It is built when your actions match your intentions over time. Every promise you keep to yourself strengthens that trust. Every promise you break without repair weakens it. This is why discipline and self-trust are inseparable. When you do what you say you will do, even in small ways, you send yourself a powerful message: I can be counted on. That message becomes identity. Over time, discipline stops being something you force and starts being something you embody. The problem with relying on extreme motivation is that it is temporary. Motivation is emotional. It rises when things feel exciting and disappears when things feel hard. Identity-based discipline does not depend on how you feel. It depends on who you believe you are. When you identify as someone who keeps their word, discipline becomes an expression of character, not effort. You don't need to hype yourself up. You don't need to threaten yourself with consequences. You simply act in alignment with your identity. This is why identity-based discipline feels sustainable. It does not require you to override your humanity. It works with it. Self-respect is the engine here. When you respect yourself, you stop making promises you don't intend to keep. You stop setting standards that punish you. You choose commitments that stretch you without breaking you. You begin to see discipline not as restriction but as protection. It protects your future. It protects your energy. It protects your integrity. Integrity is often misunderstood as a moral concept, but at its core, integrity simply means alignment. It means your values, words, and actions match. When they don't, internal friction grows. When they do, inner peace follows. Identity-based discipline reduces internal friction. You stop negotiating with yourself all day. You stop carrying the weight of unfinished intentions. You stop feeling disappointed in yourself. Instead, you build quiet confidence. This confidence is not loud or performative. It does not need validation. It comes from knowing that you follow through, even when no one is watching. Many people believe discipline should feel intense. They think if it doesn't hurt, it doesn't count. But pain is not proof of progress. Consistency is. When discipline is rooted in identity, it becomes almost boring in the best way. It becomes routine. It becomes normal. It becomes part of how you move through life. This does not mean it is always easy. It means it is honest. You stop asking yourself to be perfect. You ask yourself to be consistent. You stop aiming for flawless execution. You aim for integrity. This shift changes how you respond to setbacks. Instead of collapsing into self-judgment, you repair. You recommit. You continue. Because your identity is no longer fragile. It does not shatter at the first mistake. Self-trust grows when you know that even if you slip, you will not abandon yourself. That trust creates resilience. Resilience creates momentum. Momentum is built through credibility. And credibility is built through kept promises. Every time you choose to do what you said you would do, even when it's uncomfortable, you deposit into your self-trust account. Over time, those deposits compound. You begin to trust your future self. That trust reduces resistance. It makes effort lighter. This is why discipline rooted in self-respect feels empowering instead of draining. You are no longer proving your worth through discipline. You are expressing it. Identity-based discipline also reshapes your inner dialogue. You stop calling yourself lazy or weak. You stop catastrophizing setbacks. You start speaking to yourself as someone you are responsible for, not someone you need to control. This internal shift matters more than any external system. Systems support discipline, but identity sustains it. When you see yourself as someone who follows through, your behavior aligns. When you see yourself as unreliable, your behavior confirms it. Identity always wins in the long run. This chapter invites you to redefine discipline for yourself. To release the idea that it must be harsh to be effective. To understand that discipline built on fear will always collapse, but discipline built on self-trust will endure. You are not lacking discipline. You are learning how to build it, in a way that honors who you are becoming. Start where you are. Choose promises you can keep. Repair when you break them. Speak to yourself with honesty and respect. Let consistency, not intensity, shape your identity. Over time, discipline stops feeling like something you do. It becomes who you are. And when discipline becomes identity, success stops feeling forced. It becomes a natural extension of your character. This is the power of identity-based discipline. It does not demand more from you than you can give. It simply asks you to be aligned. And alignment changes everything. Chapter 9: Becoming Consistent Without Burnout. Consistency is the quiet force behind success, yet it is one of the most misunderstood and misapplied concepts in personal growth. Many people equate consistency with relentless effort, with pushing harder, longer, and beyond what feels natural. They believe that if they just grind more, sacrifice more, and endure more, they will finally achieve their goals. But this approach, almost inevitably, leads to burnout. Burnout is not a sign that you are weak. It is a sign that you are out of alignment. When the way you live, act, and work conflicts with the person you are becoming, every action feels like a fight. Resistance builds, energy drains, and motivation collapses under its own weight. Consistency that relies on force alone is not sustainable because it is external, not internal. The antidote to burnout is not working harder. It is aligning harder. It is designing your life, habits, and actions around the identity you are building. Identity-based alignment reduces friction, simplifies decision-making, and allows consistency to flow naturally instead of being forced. When your behaviors match the person you are becoming, consistency becomes less about pushing and more about moving. Imagine a river. Water flows effortlessly along its path, not because it fights the rocks and curves, but because it follows a natural channel. When your life is aligned with your identity, your efforts feel like this flow. You are not constantly battling yourself. You are not negotiating with your motivation every morning. You are moving along the path you have intentionally designed. Sustainable consistency begins with self-awareness. You must know what you can reasonably maintain over the long term. You must understand your energy, your priorities, and your natural rhythms. This does not mean avoiding challenge. It means designing growth in a way that honors your limits while stretching them gradually. Overstretching creates burnout. Undervaluing yourself creates stagnation. The balance lies in understanding your capacity and committing to growth that is steady, not frantic. One of the biggest mistakes people make is mistaking intensity for consistency. They sprint toward a goal in bursts of extreme effort, believing that these bursts are proof of discipline or commitment. But bursts of intensity are not the same as sustainable action. They often lead to exhaustion, guilt, and eventually retreat. Long-term progress is not measured by how fast you move in a single stretch, but by how consistently you show up over months and years. Consistency is a rhythm, not a performance. It is not proven by a perfect week or an extraordinary day. It is proven by persistence across ordinary, imperfect days. Identity-based consistency focuses on aligning your daily choices with the version of yourself you are becoming, rather than forcing behaviors that feel alien or burdensome. When alignment drives action, effort becomes lighter, and progress becomes sustainable. Consider your habits. A habit that feels aligned with your identity does not require extreme willpower. It does not feel like an uphill battle every day. You are more likely to repeat actions that resonate with the identity you are practicing to become. Conversely, habits that feel disconnected from who you see yourself as require constant negotiation, energy expenditure, and motivation to maintain. This is the invisible friction that leads to burnout. Consistency without burnout is about learning to listen to yourself while staying committed. It is about recognizing when to push and when to rest, when to stretch and when to consolidate. Alignment creates a feedback loop. As your actions reflect your identity, your energy feels more abundant. When energy is abundant, effort feels lighter. Lighter effort strengthens consistency. And consistency, repeated over time, solidifies identity. This chapter is also about shifting perspective on progress. Consistency is not about perfection or rigidity. It is about presence and reliability. You do not need to execute flawlessly every day. You need to show up with intention, repair when necessary, and maintain trust with yourself over time. Every action, every habit, every choice is a vote for who you are becoming. Even when you miss a day, The long-term trajectory matters more than the temporary lapse. Many people burn out because they mistake external achievements for internal growth. They push themselves to meet arbitrary goals, without considering whether these goals resonate with their identity or values. When goals are misaligned, motivation fades, resistance grows, and the sense of obligation becomes unbearable. Sustainable consistency emerges when goals, habits, and daily actions are rooted in the identity you are intentionally cultivating. Balance is essential to this approach. Balance does not mean mediocrity, it means strategic alignment. It means recognizing that growth requires energy, and energy requires restoration. It means honoring your body, your mind, and your emotional landscape, while building resilience and competence. Balance prevents the highs and lows that come from constant overextension, and it allows you to move forward steadily, without sacrificing long-term sustainability. Self-awareness plays a crucial role here. Awareness of your limits, tendencies, and energy cycles allows you to design consistency that feels natural instead of forced. You cannot sustainably imitate someone else's rhythm. You must understand your own. This requires observing patterns, reflecting on what depletes you versus what energizes you, and adjusting accordingly. Consistency built on self-knowledge is both resilient and adaptive. Consistency without burnout also relies on identity-based discipline, as explored in the previous chapter. Discipline that comes from self-respect and integrity, rather than guilt or fear, creates a stable foundation for sustainable growth. When your commitments align with your values and identity, maintaining them requires less emotional effort. You act because it feels natural, not because you are coercing yourself. This reduces internal friction and preserves energy for what truly matters. It is also important to distinguish between pushing through life and moving in alignment with it. Pushing through implies tension, force, and resistance. It is the strategy of the desperate or the overworked. Moving in alignment implies direction, intention, and flow. It is the strategy of someone who respects their identity, understands their limits, and prioritizes longevity over short-term gain. Alignment produces consistent results, without the emotional and physical cost of relentless force. Sustainability is further supported by designing systems, routines, and habits that are congruent with your identity. This is not about rigid schedules or endless optimization. It is about creating structures that allow consistency to happen naturally. When your environment, behaviors, and routines reflect who you are becoming, daily actions require less decision fatigue and less emotional energy. Alignment reduces the hidden resistance that often sabotages even the best intentions. Another key aspect is reframing setbacks. Consistency without burnout is not about avoiding failure. It is about learning to integrate missteps into your growth trajectory without self-judgment. When your identity is anchored in who you are becoming, rather than in every result, temporary setbacks are no longer catastrophic. They are feedback. They are opportunities to refine your approach while remaining on track. Embracing this perspective requires patience. Consistency is the accumulation of small, aligned actions over time. Progress may feel invisible day to day, but compounded, it is transformational. The long-term impact of steady alignment far outweighs short-term intensity. Those who burn out may achieve moments of brilliance, but they often lose continuity. Those who move in alignment achieve mastery over time without sacrificing themselves. Sustainable consistency also requires self-compassion. You must allow yourself grace for the days when energy dips, motivation wanes, or life demands more than expected. Self-compassion is not indulgence, it is preservation. It allows you to maintain alignment without creating internal conflict, reducing the risk of burnout while reinforcing trust in yourself. The combination of consistency and self-compassion is the hallmark of long-term growth. Finally, becoming consistent without burnout is about reframing identity itself. When your identity is anchored in being reliable, present, and aligned, rather than in external achievements, consistency becomes inevitable. You act in accordance with your self-concept, not under pressure from circumstances or expectations. You stop chasing results and start embodying the principles that naturally produce results. Alignment becomes the engine, consistency becomes the vehicle, and burnout is no longer part of the journey. This chapter invites you to approach growth as a long-term practice rather than a short-term performance. It invites you to notice where you are pushing unnecessarily and to realign your efforts with your identity. It encourages patience, self-awareness, and balance. It reminds you that true consistency does not exhaust, it preserves, nurtures, and compounds. As you move forward, remember this: sustainability is not a compromise. It is a strategy. It is not about doing less, it is about doing right. It is not about avoiding challenge, it is about respecting yourself as you meet it. Moving in alignment allows you to maintain momentum indefinitely, transforming daily effort into lasting transformation. Consistency without burnout is not merely a technique. It is a lifestyle. It is an expression of integrity, self-respect, and identity. It is the natural consequence of aligning who you are becoming with what you do each day. And when you achieve this, growth is no longer a battle. It is a journey that feels purposeful, energetic, and unstoppable. The path forward is not about forcing yourself to be more. It is about aligning more deeply. It is about listening to the cues of your energy, observing your habits, honoring your limits, and moving intentionally. Alignment reduces resistance. Alignment sustains energy. Alignment makes consistency natural. By choosing alignment over force, by valuing identity over temporary results, you set yourself on a trajectory of sustainable growth. You move steadily, confidently, and intentionally. You build habits, trust, and momentum without the emotional and physical cost of burnout. Consistency without burnout is the ultimate form of mastery. It is the integration of identity, discipline, self-trust, and alignment. It is the way of those who achieve not by intensity alone, but by steady, principled motion. It is living proof that growth does not have to come at the cost of your well-being. And once you embrace this approach, the life you are building no longer feels like a battle. It feels like belonging to yourself, to your purpose, and to the person you are becoming. You do not need to push harder. You need to align better. And in alignment, consistency, and self-respect, you will find a rhythm that carries you forward effortlessly, sustainably, and powerfully. Chapter 10: Living as the person your goals require. There comes a point in the journey of growth when change is no longer about effort or strategy. When you stop trying and start living as the person your goals demand, transformation becomes effortless. This is the essence of identity-based growth. The day your actions stop feeling like work and start feeling like natural expressions of who you have become. Living as the person your goals require is not an abstract idea. It is the practical manifestation of every choice, habit, and thought aligned with your emerging identity. It is the culmination of intentional design, self-trust, discipline, and consistent action. At this stage, success is no longer something you chase. It becomes a byproduct of alignment. It is no longer a goal on a to-do list, but a reflection of the person you embody. The journey to this stage begins long before you feel ready. It begins with small, deliberate steps, choosing actions that match your desired identity even when they feel unfamiliar, keeping promises to yourself even when it is uncomfortable, and refusing to let setbacks define your self-concept. Over time, these small steps accumulate. Each choice strengthens self-trust. Each habit reinforces identity. Each day lived in alignment rewires belief into reality. One of the most profound shifts in this phase is the transformation of decision-making. Decisions are no longer debates between fear, comfort, and desire. They are filtered through the lens of identity. When you ask yourself, "What would the person I am becoming do?" clarity arises. Options shrink, distractions fade, and choice becomes purposeful. Your internal compass replaces external pressure. You no longer negotiate with yourself constantly. Instead, you move confidently in the direction of your vision because your internal standards guide you. Boundaries, too, are reshaped in this new identity. The person you are becoming naturally protects their energy, time, and focus. You stop compromising your values to accommodate others' expectations or social convenience. You no longer allow urgency or pressure to override importance. Your boundaries are not walls, they are markers of alignment. They preserve the integrity of your identity and make consistency sustainable. Living this way is not selfish, it is responsible. It allows you to operate from strength rather than scarcity, clarity rather than compromise. Confidence emerges as a natural byproduct of embodiment. No longer dependent on external validation, confidence becomes internalized. You do not need others to affirm your worth, because you experience it through your actions. Each promise kept, each aligned habit practiced, each boundary honored strengthens the internal narrative that you are capable, reliable, and resilient. Confidence stops being a fleeting emotion and becomes a steady state, rooted in proof rather than hope. Resilience, likewise, is strengthened through embodiment. Challenges no longer shake you because they do not threaten identity. Failure becomes feedback, and setbacks are reframed as opportunities to reinforce alignment. When the person you are becoming is your foundation, your self-worth is not tied to outcomes. You can navigate adversity with composure, adapt without panic, and recover without guilt. Resilience becomes the natural result of living from a stable, internal self-concept, rather than reacting to external circumstances. Living as the person your goals require also transforms your relationship with habits. They cease to be obligations and become extensions of identity. Actions such as reading, exercising, reflecting, or prioritizing meaningful work are no longer tasks to check off, they are expressions of who you are. When identity and behavior are aligned, habits require less force, less negotiation, and less motivation. They become automatic evidence of the person you embody, rather than chores you endure. This embodiment reshapes your perception of success. Success is no longer a destination to chase or a metric to achieve. It is the inevitable byproduct of consistently living in alignment with the person you have chosen to be. When your thoughts, habits, values, and decisions all reinforce identity, results naturally follow. Achievement becomes the echo of integrity rather than the driver of self-worth. You no longer measure yourself by what you accomplish, but by who you consistently choose to become. Living this way also changes your interactions with others. The person you embody sets a tone through presence rather than performance. You communicate with clarity because your values are anchored. You lead through example rather than instruction. Your relationships shift to reflect alignment. You attract people who resonate with your identity, and you naturally step away from those who disrupt it. Living authentically draws support, respect, and synergy, rather than friction and compromise. It is important to recognize that embodiment does not mean perfection. Even as the person you are becoming, you will face setbacks, make mistakes, and encounter resistance. Identity-based growth is not about being flawless, it is about alignment, repair, and persistence. When missteps occur, they do not define you. You respond from the framework of identity, recommit, and continue. The difference between past approaches and this one is that alignment creates continuity and reduces the internal conflict that once sabotaged growth. Living from this identity also expands creativity and courage. When you are no longer divided between who you think you should be and who you are trying to become, your energy is freed for innovation and bold action. The internal friction that once sapped courage is minimized, leaving space for calculated risks, authentic expression, and meaningful contribution. You act decisively not from impulse or reaction, but from alignment with your emerging self-concept. Another profound effect is the sense of freedom that accompanies embodiment. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. Freedom is moving intentionally without being hijacked by fear, doubt, or old patterns. The person you are becoming is free because their internal compass guides them. Freedom is the liberation from internal battles, procrastination, and indecision. It is the capacity to act consistently and effectively, grounded in identity rather than external approval. Spiritual, emotional, and mental growth also accelerate when you live as the person your goals require. With alignment as the foundation, reflection, introspection, and self-awareness deepen. You are able to observe thought patterns without being controlled by them. You experience emotions fully, without being consumed. You choose responses that reinforce identity rather than perpetuate old habits. Living in alignment cultivates a maturity and wisdom that no amount of strategy or planning could achieve alone. One of the most liberating aspects of this embodiment is the elimination of the constant internal struggle that once plagued change efforts. When your identity is aligned with your desired outcomes, motivation is no longer the gatekeeper of action. You do not debate whether to exercise, work on your craft, or pursue a goal. The person you are has already decided, and action flows naturally. This shift conserves energy, reduces stress, and creates a rhythm of consistent progress. Embodiment also reframes the relationship between effort and reward. You no longer see effort as a burden or a test. You see it as the natural expression of your chosen identity. Success is not a prize for pushing harder. It is the mirror reflecting that you have been living as the person you intended to be. Every accomplishment is confirmation of alignment, not validation of worth. This reframing removes pressure, increases sustainability, and transforms work into a fulfilling expression of self. Living as the person your goals require also instills a sense of inevitability. When identity, values, habits, and choices are aligned, outcomes become predictable. Not because you control every variable, but because the trajectory is determined by repeated alignment over time. This inevitability is empowering. It replaces anxiety with confidence, reaction with intentionality, and desperation with patience. You no longer chase results, you create conditions for their natural emergence. This stage of identity-based growth is the point where transformation feels complete, not because you have arrived at some ultimate goal, but because living in alignment is now your default mode. The struggle that once defined personal growth, resistance, inconsistency, self-doubt, is replaced by rhythm, integrity, and trust. You act in accordance with who you have chosen to be, and the life that aligns with this identity emerges naturally around you. Ultimately, living as the person your goals require is about embodiment. It is about no longer negotiating with your actions, habits, or self-concept. It is about merging intention with reality so seamlessly that every choice becomes a reflection of your identity. Success, achievement, and fulfillment are no longer distant targets. They are natural outcomes of the person you have become. In this final phase, life ceases to feel like a series of battles. It feels like alignment, flow, and intentionality. You do not merely hope for results. You live in a way that makes them inevitable. You do not chase discipline, courage, or resilience. You practice them naturally, because they are woven into your identity. You do not seek validation. You create credibility with yourself daily through alignment and integrity. Living as the person your goals require is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a new way of experiencing life. Every decision, relationship, and action becomes filtered through identity rather than impulse, fear, or external expectation. Growth becomes self-perpetuating because the system of self-alignment you have built supports continuous evolution. You are no longer a traveler chasing a destination. You are the person through whom the destination manifests. This is the culmination of identity-based growth. It is not defined by perfection, by external achievement, or by the absence of challenge. It is defined by embodiment, by consistency, by trust in yourself, and by alignment between your daily actions and the version of yourself you have intentionally chosen. When you live this way, success is not something you hope for. It is the reflection of a life lived in integrity, alignment, and purpose. You are no longer trying to change. You are already the change. You are no longer hoping to succeed. You are already living as the person whose existence makes success inevitable. And in that alignment, everything you desire naturally flows toward you, not because of luck or motivation or external pressure, but because you have become the person who produces it effortlessly, consistently, and powerfully. Conclusion: you don't rise to your goals, you fall to your identity. If there is one truth to carry with you beyond the pages of this book, it is this: lasting change does not come from effort alone. You do not rise to your goals, you fall to your identity. All the motivation in the world, all the plans and all the strategies will only take you so far. When the pressures of life intensify, when discipline falters, when challenges appear, it is not your goals that sustain you, it is the identity you have built, the person you have chosen to become. For too long, many of us have believed that change is a matter of doing more, working harder, forcing ourselves, or pushing through even when our energy is gone. We set goals with the hope that achievement will somehow transform us into the person we wish to be. We chase results, expecting them to shape our beliefs, behaviors, and self-concept. And when the results do not come, or when life tests us, we are left frustrated, blaming ourselves for failing. This is the trap of outcome-based growth. It treats success as a reward for effort, rather than as the natural reflection of who we are. Identity-based growth reframes this entire story. It shifts the focus from what you are trying to achieve to who you are becoming. It teaches that the person you embody is the foundation for lasting change. Your goals do not define you, your identity does. Every choice, habit, and action becomes a vote for the person you are growing into. Over time, these votes accumulate. They shape belief, reinforce discipline, and cultivate resilience. Your goals become inevitable, not because you work harder, but because you act in alignment with the person you are becoming. This does not mean that transformation requires dramatic, overnight changes. In fact, attempting to overhaul everything at once often leads to burnout, frustration, and regression. True change is built slowly, through consistency, through repeated alignment, and through the small, often invisible choices made each day. It is in showing up when it is uncomfortable, keeping promises to yourself, practicing the habits of your desired identity, and repairing when you fall short that real growth occurs. This is how the ordinary becomes extraordinary, one choice at a time, compounded across days, months, and years. Patience is essential in this journey. You will not see immediate results from your first attempts at identity-based growth. Change is rarely flashy. It is subtle, quiet, and cumulative. The small actions you take today may feel insignificant, but they are planting the seeds of transformation. Over time, they strengthen self-trust, deepen discipline, and reinforce the internal narrative that you are capable of the life you desire. Patience allows you to honor the process, to trust that consistency outweighs intensity, and to recognize that setbacks are not failures, they are opportunities for refinement and learning. Self-compassion is equally vital. Many people attempt to grow while carrying a critical inner voice, believing that they must punish themselves for past habits or shortcomings to earn progress. This approach creates resistance, internal friction, and ultimately inconsistency. Identity-based growth invites you to replace judgment with compassion. You do not need to be perfect to become the person your goals require. You only need to keep showing up. You honor yourself through your efforts, forgive yourself for missteps, and recommit to alignment. This combination of self-compassion and accountability forms the foundation of sustainable growth. Long-term commitment is the final pillar. Building identity is not a sprint, it is a marathon. It is the slow, deliberate process of aligning who you are with who you wish to become. You commit not to a fleeting goal, but to a trajectory of growth. Every choice, every habit, every act of integrity is a step along this path. Over time, this commitment compounds, shaping the beliefs, behaviors, and character traits that will sustain you through challenges, setbacks, and change. As you integrate these principles into your life, the difference becomes tangible. Decisions feel clearer. Habits flow more naturally. Confidence is steady, rooted in evidence rather than hope. Discipline becomes an expression of identity rather than a punishment. You are no longer negotiating with yourself constantly, no longer relying on motivation alone. Your internal compass guides your actions. You are moving in alignment with the person you have chosen to become. Living this way transforms your relationship with goals. Goals are no longer distant, abstract targets or burdensome checklists. They become reflections of the person you embody. Achievement is no longer a validation of worth, it is the natural outcome of consistent, aligned living. Success is no longer something you chase, it is something you live. It manifests effortlessly because your identity, habits, and choices all point in the same direction. Your life begins to mirror the person you have cultivated, and fulfillment becomes inseparable from your daily actions. Remember, the journey of identity-based growth is not linear. There will be days when you falter, when old habits resurface, or when doubt creeps in. These moments are not evidence of failure, they are part of the process. What matters is not perfection but persistence. What matters is returning to alignment, recommitting to the principles of growth, and continuing to live as the person your goals require. Every act of repair strengthens your identity, deepens self-trust, and reinforces your trajectory. At its core, the message of this book is simple but profound. If you want lasting change, focus not on the external outcomes but on the internal transformation. Focus on becoming the person whose life naturally produces the results you desire. Focus on alignment over intensity, integrity over perfection, and embodiment over mere intention. Build your identity through daily choices, honor your growth through self-compassion, and sustain it through consistency and long-term commitment. When you internalize this truth, everything changes. The stress of chasing goals fades. The pressure of motivation diminishes. The frustration of inconsistency resolves. You are no longer defined by what you achieve in a day, a month, or even a year. You are defined by who you are becoming, and how consistently you act in alignment with that identity. And from that foundation, success, fulfillment, and purpose are not distant, they are inevitable. As you close this book and return to your life, carry this principle with you: you do not rise to your goals, you fall to your identity. The person you choose to be today, and every day after, is the person who will shape your outcomes tomorrow. You do not need to revolutionize your entire life at once. You only need to show up consistently, act with alignment, honor your values, and commit to becoming the person your goals require. Keep showing up. Keep choosing alignment. Keep reinforcing your identity with every choice you make. Trust that the life you desire is built through these daily actions, not by shortcuts, external validation, or fleeting motivation. Be patient, be compassionate, and be committed. When you do this, you will realize the ultimate truth of identity-based growth. Success is no longer something you chase. It is not a distant destination or an uncertain prize. Success is the natural reflection of the person you have become. It is living in harmony with your own identity, expressing your values through action, and embodying the character traits that produce the life you desire. You have the power to become the person your goals require. And when you do, everything else follows effortlessly, consistently, and beautifully. Thank you for reading this book. I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to leave us a review. TM Light. Disclaimer. This book was created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. While every effort was made to ensure the accuracy and relevance of the content, readers should note that this cannot be considered professional advice. Readers are encouraged to apply their own judgment and consult experts where needed.